Hey everybody, welcome to Rappin With ReefBum. I'm your host, Keith Berkelhamer, and today I welcome Joe Caparatta, who is the owner of Unique Corals, which is a wholesale and retail facility in California. Joe also started Manhattan Aquariums, which is a retail store and service and maintenance company in New York City. And Joe is the co-owner of Marco Rocks. Joe, I did not know this. And he has also written about the reef keeping hobby and has been a guest speaker at conferences. I'm really psyched to have Joe as a guest. Joe, man, welcome to the show.
Nice to meet you. Nice to be here.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you all.
Yeah. So, folks, I know you're finding the stream and what have you, and this is a really awesome opportunity. We've got a great guest on the show tonight, so feel free to ask a lot of questions as we kind of get into the dialogue. Joe, I got a lot of questions for you myself.
Okay.
And we're gonna show some video of Unique Corals. You did a little behind the scenes tour for us, but before we kind of get into all that stuff, I always like to ask my guests, how they got started in the business or the hobby. So, Joe, what's your story?
My story, I started getting into aquariums when I was about 10 years old. My grandfather was a full-time fisherman in Cape Cod Bay. He had lobster pots.
Wow.
Commercial fishing. He was a welder, and then when I was born, he started doing more and more fishing. So that's the grandfather I knew. So every year we'd go up to Cape Cod. I'd spend summers with him and fishing, and I guess I just loved the ocean. I got my first aquarium at 10. I would enjoy going to ponds and local creeks and try to fill it. I was not good at keeping fish alive then. Then a new store opened up in my neighborhood, and it was called Ecosystem Aquarium. It was a Chinese individual. He owned it, a very nice guy named Perry Yang, and I would ride my bike there every day after school, and he offered me a job, and it was $3 an hour, and I rode my bike every day, 13, 14, 15 years old. And then a woman came in and told me she wanted me to clean her fish tank, and her husband had just had a stroke, and she would pay me $20 to clean her freshwater tank. And little did I know, but that would become my first aquarium in I don't want to use the word empire, but a giant aquarium service company in New York City. So I would ride my bike to her house, and I got very friendly with her, and she referred me to somebody else, and I started my own service company. And I realized soon that I could make more money doing private work than I could working for a fish store. So I set my sights on building this company while I was in school and while I was in college, and before I knew it, I had about 20 accounts. Most of them paying between $50 and $100 each. And from there, the rest is history. I kept snowballing into larger and larger spaces, took on a partner, ended the partnership amicably, and I eventually moved into New York City, where I tried to really dominate New York. Right now we have about 18 employees there, about 200 accounts. The store is still running there. I still go back and forth. Right now it's tough with COVID. But from that, and trying to be true to my business connections and friends, I was able to spawn off multiple businesses from that just by networking through the industry. And today I think I have five businesses and about 50 employees. And I enjoy what I do. I work with aquariums every day, and I'm fortunate enough to sit in my own fish room here, which is a converted garage, and I'm surrounded by a bunch of empty tanks.
And you're going to give us a little tour of that fish room as well.
Yeah, we'll show you it.
So hold it. You got Unique Corals,
Yep.
Manhattan Aquariums,
Yep.
Marco Rocks. What are the other two?
Unique Corals Solomon Islands, which is a company in Solomon Islands, Honiara. It's been there for about a year and a half. We have a facility now on the water, and we have local farmers who grow corals. I partnered with an ex-employee, Tim Kelly, who's been living there for a year and a half. He's back now with COVID. Because of COVID, and he doesn't have COVID. And as soon as we get the green light, we will start resuming shipping corals from that area. And then I also am partners with a company called Delua. We sell and distribute Illumagic lights, Delua Great White Skimmers, and then we run the Triton lab. Isan and I have a Triton business where we do all the testing. So it depends how you break it down, 5 or 6 businesses.
Well, that is pretty freaking impressive there, Joe, in terms of having your hands in so many different businesses. I just have this one business, and I find myself a little overwhelmed at times. So I don't know how you do it with 5.
It is overwhelming, believe me, especially when you got to go to Florida or go to New York. And I have 2 young kids too, and a wife, and I try to give them as much time as I can. So you have to not sweat over the small issues, and you have to not micromanage and trust your people and look at the month as a whole and not look at the bad days. As long as you're having 25 good days and 5 bad days, you're doing well, something like that.
So let's talk about Manhattan Aquariums, because as you said, that's kind of like how you got your start really in the reef keeping world, right? In terms of your first business. So that's kind of like where it started off for you. And before we had a pre-call and you and I were talking, I mentioned to you that I used to live and work in the New York City area, and my office was, I don't know, maybe a 30-minute walk to Manhattan Aquariums. And on a Friday, slow Friday during lunchtime, I would absolutely enjoy taking a nice walk to check out Manhattan Aquariums, because there weren't really a lot of other stores and other options around to check out around the Midtown Manhattan area. I don't think there were any other than these chain retail stores in that area. Yep. There used to be some stuff down in Greenwich Village in terms of some nice reef, coral selections and fish and what have you, but nothing like Manhattan Aquarium. So I always used to enjoy going there and checking out the display tanks. And you guys, certainly I haven't been there in a few years, but just talk to us a little bit about how that all came to be in terms of what it is today.
So that facility was. It took a couple of iterations before I could actually justify the expense of a ground floor retail business there. And one of my service clients, who became a friend of mine, said that his landlord had some rent on a 4th floor space in New York City. It was only like $900 a month. It was maybe 700 square feet, but it was enough for me to get my foothold into New York City, where I could then respond to emergencies and market as a New York-based service company. I realized that a lot of the competition needed to project their strength into the city, and that was a weak spot. So by having a home base in the city, I was able to grow the company a little bit faster. So after a couple of years, I moved to a 3rd floor space, and then I rented the basement, and then I was tired of having floods that would drain down into the tenants below. And I said, damn it, I got to move and get a ground floor space. So I hired a real estate agent, and we found a spot on 37th Street, and it was perfect. It had a parking lot, basement, I put all the filtrations, penetrated the floor, put all the display tanks upstairs, and that was in 2005. But the service and installation business is really the lifeblood of, I think, most saltwater retail aquarium shops these days. I mean, of course, there's exceptions to that, but I think new businesses, you'd be you'd be hard pressed to find one that's doing really well without a service arm to bring in the revenue. It's a very cash positive business, especially if you own the vehicle. If it's owner operated and you're charging, 100, 130 an hour to do services, and you could do the math pretty quickly. You could rack up some good income. Of course, you have to be good and not be running around fixing issues. But so that's what we did. We built the service arm and used the store as the backbone of the service, and also used the display room to support the marketing and getting new accounts. And then it turned into a 7-day-a-week visit for people to come in. It was very hard competing with the online businesses. And I knew that. And you can't really survive if you're charging more than what somebody could buy it for online. And I know there was a big resistance for years. And people justified, well, I have my store, I pay my rent, I need to charge what I need to charge. That's fine. But when a customer looks at their phone and it's 30% less, you're not going to win. So you have to sell the service and sell the fish and sell other things, but compete with online, very head on.
So at what point in time did you say to yourself, okay, Manhattan Aquariums is doing well, and I don't know in terms of the chronological order in terms of when you started your businesses, but at what point did you come up with the idea for Unique Corals?
So I'll actually take it back a little further. It's actually New York Aquarium Service was formed in 2001. That was my service business. And then in 2005, when I opened the store, I called it Manhattan Aquariums. They're both corporations that are active today. We operate most of our work now under Manhattan Aquariums, but in 2007, 2008, I started to see a surge in online WYSIWYG corals. People were taking corals and cutting them up. I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. I need to do this. So I started Unique Corals with a couple of employees, and unfortunately, I learned a very valuable lesson about people and characters then. The employees all kind of got together and left at once, and they literally came dry. It's okay, it's a lesson. It hurt at the time, but it was an education for me. And so I shut down the business. I had no photographer, no bagger, nothing. I was running around doing installations and service. So I said to myself, one day I'm going to open this company. I'm going to do it right. I'm going to do it in the West Coast where I can bring in the corals, not have to buy them from people in California. And I'll also support my East Coast business by bringing them through LA, because LA is the hub. And so around 2012, the business was strong enough where I could actually leave it. So I'm sorry, I misspoke. So from 2008 to 2000, maybe 10, Unique Corals was born in the basement of Manhattan Aquariums. We set up a bunch of 92-gallon raceways. We did our photography. The website was good. Sales were good. Everything was good until the employees decided they would start their own business. And then from 2010 to 2012, it was shut down. In 2012, I rolled the dice. I let my staff run Manhattan Aquariums, and I moved to the West Coast and leased a giant facility. I did it at the time with Scott Fellman, and then I bought him out a couple of years later, and it's been solo owned by myself ever since.
Well, I tell you, that takes a lot of guts to to do what you just did in terms of if you got trustworthy employees, then I guess you can kind of take that risk and go out and start that business. But that must have taken a lot of courage to do that, given the pause you had in the business before. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, Joe shot a little behind-the-scene tour of Unique Corals. So what I'd like to do, Joe, is let's play that. You narrated through that, but then when it's done, we'll come back and we'll talk about it. So let me roll the video.
Okay.
Hey guys, Joe Caparatta here, Unique Corals. I'm doing a quick and dirty video of our facility. We've been here since 2012, and we import a lot of cool coral and now a lot of dry goods. Triton, Destaco, Pax Bellum, Pantheri. We also distribute marker rocks, and we've got our Triton lab here. Let me show you that one. And this is Abraham getting ready to do today's batch tests, and that's the machine. A lot of work goes into making sure it's right, everything's calibrated. We can run up to 50 samples in one day, and the machine runs for about 12 hours every time we do tests. We were sending them to Germany, but now we bought the machine and we do it here with Isan. He does all the hard work, all the programming and all the interpretation of data. And typically when we get samples in, we're firing up the machine that night and people are getting their results the next day. So we went from a 5 to 10 day lead time to now really the next day or 48 hours after we receive it. So that's that. We've got our admin offices over here. I don't want to show you all the boring stuff. I know you want to see coral, but we'll do a quick detour. I've got the orange gel lens on, so everything looks a little bit off, but every day we send out a bunch of orders, wholesale, retail, a lot of live coral. This is an order, a little messy, but getting ready to go out. Some Triton stuff, and we've got a lot of Triton here. Everywhere you see is Triton. There's a lot of Pax Bellum. There's the Stocko, and it's actually way too thick and busy over there to look. So let's just go around and look at some coral. We've got our fish system over here. This is just stuff that we do like for service accounts, and for some wholesale people we bring in some fish with our corals and we sell to them. We've got 6 of these raceways. Each one is 2,000 gallons, and they're 30 feet long, 2 feet high, and 4 feet wide. We've got an area over here that's our aquaculture grow out that's off limits. We just redid the plumbing, all that, so there's only a few corals, nothing you guys are gonna miss. There's most of the raceways are pretty packed with coral. Unfortunately, the lights are really blue now because it's coming to the end of the day, so they're gonna go dark in another hour or so. But there's a lot of coral here. You can see we've got really nice Fabia and Montes, old school green star polyp. Finally getting some nice mariculture stuff in. Those are green trumpets. And these systems are all pretty much full. Raceway 5 is a little kind of half empty. These are acro frags. This is our online inventory. So this is everything that's been cataloged and photographed. This is all WYSIWYG. So everything over here is going up online or is already up online. Nice chalices. We run the Stocko calcium reactors on the systems. That's our main alkalinity and calcium monitoring. We do our own ICP testing in-house, and then we spot dose and correct for any elements that are deviating from the set points that we need. We've got, I'll show you some fun stuff over here. They're all G4 Radion lights, really good lights. They get the job done, and there's just so much to look at in here. A lot of cool coral. A lot of mariculture stuff over here. That's our water treatment system over there. We've got RO, DI, the Stocko doing its thing. We just set up these MRC protein skimmers with the triple cone washdown. Kind of a cool feature. Yeah, I'll plug it in for you guys real quick. So we've got 3 of these units running already. We've had them since 2012 in their workhorses, and we've finally bought 3 more. So this is a timer right here that is going to turn this blue line pump on. That will automatically wash down the entire top of the skimmer. And I literally just got this thing up and running, so it just needs a little bit more time to break in. This one, as soon as I get one more fitting, this will be done. And the way these work, again, this is a quick and dirty, I'm just talking from what I see. Got a Varios pump, does about 800 gallons an hour. It pumps up into the unit. It goes into here, and then a big MRC pump with a really cool needle wheel impeller grinds up the water and air through a blue Venturi hose, and that recirculates. So you have a lot of dwell time to really build up the organic load, and it really makes the skimmer work much better. And then the third pump here is the washdown. You can see there's another skimmer there, and then there's 3 more in the back that are running. And I don't want this video to be too long, so I'm going to cut it here. But thanks for watching, and I look forward to the live stream. So I'm going to leave you guys with some cool coral candy.
Wow, Joe, that's pretty freaking cool, man. I love seeing stuff like that. So cool. Who designed that whole thing? Was that you? Did you kind of collaborate with the folks that work at Unique Corals? I mean, go ahead. I got a couple of questions for you.
So, I guess you could say most of that has been there since we started it in 2012. There's definitely stuff, the raceways I found, the skimmers I wanted to use Rogers skimmers on it. So most of that is my design, but the guy that actually built the facility, his name is Chilo, and he's built a lot of the wholesale import companies in Los Angeles. Maybe SDC, Quality Marine, Pacific. I mean, he's well known going in and doing everything, like turnkey operation. He's a bull. He's a hardworking guy. So he really did most of the plumbing there. Once I realized that he could handle it, I was able to focus on other things. So that was great. And then over the years, we've realized that we need to change this, we need to change that. And some of my new employees over the last few years have really opened my eyes up to changing things and doing things a little different. And so I credit my staff. I won't take credit myself. It's definitely a group effort to get the facility where it is now, for sure.
So how often do you guys reevaluate what you're using in terms of equipment? So for the lighting, you're using the Radeon G4s. Has there been talk about upgrading to the G5s? When do you guys kind of make the move? There's always so many innovations in terms of new equipment that's out there, and obviously you have a large facility, so to make change would be most likely expensive, I would think.
Yeah.
So how do you guys handle that sort of thing?
So the biggest problem for us was when we designed the facility, we used what was available in 2011, 2012. It was big AC pumps, RK2 pumps, big heaters, big chillers. You're talking about a lot of volume of water, and metal halide lights and T5s. So our ambient water, our water temperature ran at around 85, 86. Whoa. The facility was at 77, 75. So it goes to show when you're running a 1 horsepower pump and a big pump on the skimmer, and you're using metal halide lights that are close to the water, even T5s, you put a lot of that heat energy into the water. So therefore, you have to cool it with heating and cooling. So our electric design was crazy. I mean, it was really intense, and there were days where we would blow the panel, with just too much power. So that was very hard. Only recently, when we switched to the G4 lights, and then I switched to all the biz pumps, the systems are running at a degree above the room temperature. So I realized I did not need the heaters and I did not need the chillers. We invested in better room air conditioners with heaters built in. They were gas driven. Our electric bill went down. We controlled the ambient temperature, closed up the vents in the ceiling that allowed the place to breathe, and invested in dehumidifiers to keep the humidity reasonable and comfortable. And now it's at a 78 degrees all year round with 25% humidity and no heaters, no chillers. We pulled them all off. We don't have any blackouts now. A lot less power consumption. The air conditioner runs more, but that's okay. So the G5s, we definitely want to switch to them. But right now we're having a lot of success with the G4s, so we don't have to do it, anytime soon. When they're available, the price is right, and we could justify the purchase, we'll do it.
So you showed the calcium reactors there you're using for that facility in terms of the calcium alkalinity supplementation. What do you guys like to keep your key parameters at, like alkalinity and calcium, magnesium, phosphate, nitrate? What are your targets there for those types of parameters? So
we're keeping DKH around 8.5. That's where the systems seem to be pretty stable, between 8 and 9. Calcium is 450, magnesium's 1370. All normal parameters as far as the major ions. Salt specific gravity 1.026. We try to keep our phosphates between 0.02 and 0.10. We find just keeping that sweet spot controls algae, allows the corals to have the nutrition they need, and they grow really well. And then for the nitrate, we're keeping it around 5 to 10 ppms. Sometimes it gets a little bit higher, and we don't really see an adverse effect. But I do believe it's best to keep your PO4 and your NO3, as balanced as you can. So those are the parameters we shoot for. And we do notice that with the bright lights, they really consume nutrients. So we even have to dose nitrogen.
So what do you guys use for? And I apologize if I didn't notice this in the video, because you and I were talking during the video while I was running.
Okay. Yeah.
So, but in terms of nutrient export, what are you guys using?
Right now, we really actually have a problem getting nutrients in, because it's such a they're heavily stocked coral systems. So we're not in a situation where we have a lot of fish and a high bioload that we have to export nutrients. So if anything, we're adding nutrients, but we do water changes. We'll do water changes to freshen it up. It's just easier on a commercial system like this. We have 2 valves. We always have about 1,000 to 2,000 gallons of salt water on tap. And we have a lot of hands that go in, and there's hand sanitizer and creams, and corals getting fragged. So we just find on a commercial system doing water changes is really good. And then maybe somebody watching that says, I've heard you say in the talk that for Triton, you don't do water changes. Well, those are two different methodologies, and water changes are never bad. But if you can run a system without it, then you can keep that tool in your toolbox and not introduce the variables that sometimes come along with it. And I can get into that too. But for us, we found that doing water changes seems to be pretty important. We can also suck out the detritus that grows under the racks. So there's several reasons why we want to do water changes.
And you guys are you got the big protein skimmers, so that's certainly carrying some of that load in terms of the export.
Yes.
So
yep, absolutely.
Joe, talk about let's talk more about Triton, because you showed the Triton lab. You have there is a Triton lab now in your facility, Unique Corals,
Yes.
And that's relatively new in terms of being able to now send water samples to a lab in the U.S. and be able to get much quicker turnaround time on the ICP testing. But let's talk about Triton and what it's all about and why ICP testing is important. And then we could also circle back in terms of what we were talking about before in terms of the option to use Triton supplements versus doing the actual Triton system.
Okay. So Triton, I'll give a quick history. I always like to talk a little bit about the foundation. I feel it helps people to understand things better. I got invited by Jake Adams in 2014 to go on a dive trip in Indonesia to the Flores Sea. We were going to go to Komodo and see the dragons and do about 10 days on a liveaboard. On that boat was Vincent Chalias from Bali Aquarium and Isan Dashti and his wife Linda. And we all spent about 10 days on this little Indonesian boat. That's a whole story in itself. But it was amazing diving, a lot of cool diversity in those Indonesian islands. But every night I got to pick Isan's brain, and Isan is the founder of Triton. And he was the first to take an ICP machine, which everyone says you never want to put salt water in. And he was the first to really use it for reef keeping, to see the parts per billion and parts per million of all the trace elements that we say do good things in our reef water. So he perfected it. He came up with his own method, and he adapted it by making changes to the machine to benefit the reef aquarist, the hobbyist. That's the heart of it. And that spawned a need for really good supplements, pure supplements, pharmaceutical grade, without contaminants that you can see in the machine. And it spawned this organic, holistic approach of reef keeping that reduce variables, increase predictability. The less you do, the easier it will be to get to your target. So you start designing a system that can do a lot of the things for you, and you don't rely on this, and you don't rely on that, you don't rely on water change that could have problems with your RODI system, or the salt's bad, or they have a hotspot of elements in it. And what you're left with is the basic needs of the coral, setting up an algae-based system to export the nutrients, and that algae bed is larger than the tank's need. Let me back up. The algae bed's needs are greater than what the tank can give it. So you basically turn the theory on its head that the filter is supporting the tank. The tank is actually supporting the filter. You've got this giant algae bed saying, feed me, feed me, feed me, and what you're left with is really low, really steady nitrate and phosphorus and even carbon, and you're getting trace elements that are being released by the algae. And it's also a breeding ground for all kinds of little organisms that the reef needs. And then your waste is exported through that algae bed and by a protein skimmer. And now with ICP testing, you can know exactly what your water needs, because every tank is a little bit different. The deviations can be corrected through ICP testing and hobby kit testing. So basically, Triton method is setting up a natural system, an algae-based system, no ozone, no UV, no mechanical filtration, and letting the system handle the waste. Once the training wheels come off and the tank has momentum, you can regulate the levels of waste by how much you feed. Energy in gets consumed, you kind of know what comes out in your protein skimmer. And water changes are reserved for when you need them. Otherwise, it doesn't change the quality of the inhabitant's life in the tank. It's not part of the regular toolkit. As far as ICP testing, I became his distributor in the U.S. around 2015. I'm still the U.S. distributor. And last year, we built the lab here. So until last year, we started sending all the ICP tests to Germany, and it would take 7 to 10 years. 7 to 10 days.
Seemed like 7 to 10 years, right?
That was a slip. So now it's we literally test the day we receive them. We give ourselves 48 hours to turn the tests around, because sometimes we get more tests than we can process. But even if you're not running the Triton method, just knowing what's in your water, knowing how things are deviating, like people that run no-pox, you don't realize that you're adding a lot of molybdenum. Molybdenum goes really, really high. When we first brought Triton into the U.S., there were so many corrections to manufacturers' products, like the Thrive line, where everything was in aluminum bottles. There was aluminum in everybody's tanks. The ceramic biomedia blocks, everybody that ran those had a high aluminum. New setups that with PVC all had high tin. Karen Britton in the Hawaiian Islands, she couldn't get larval fish to get past a certain date. We did an ICP test. Turns out she had very high zinc. There was some bolts in the bottom of her tanks where the epoxy coating had gone away and the zinc was being released and damaging the fish at a certain point in their life. So all of this anecdotal evidence supports that the hobby really benefits from this ICP testing. The salt manufacturers cleaned up their act. They started buying better ingredients now that they knew that hobbyists were armed with a $50 test to validate really what's in those products. So it definitely cleaned up the industry a little bit, and now people use it to see if there's heavy metals, their polyp extension is low, they can see what's going on. I could talk forever, so I'm going to stop right here.
I actually just ordered an ICP test from you guys this morning, so it already told me that it's on its way, so that's awesome, you know?
Awesome.
Gotta love it. So Joe, you the coral facility there at Unique Corals is using Triton additives, supplements,
Yep.
but is not on the Triton system, correct?
So the Triton system is the core 7. It's basically a 4-bottle mix with all the traces and major ions that you need, your alkalinity, calcium, magnesium, in a very balanced mix. And what you do is you set the dosage rate for each bottle, with a standard doser based on your alkalinity demand to keep alkalinity stable. So let's say somebody with a 100-gallon tank takes 20 mLs a day to maintain their alkalinity. Well, they're going to be dosing 20 mLs of channel A, channel B, channel C, and channel D. That's going to deliver the proper ratios of vanadium, zinc, iodine, molybdenum, all the things that the corals would need. And then you can validate how far your tank is deviating. Like, let's say one person has a lot of Montipora and the other person has no Montipora. They're going to use elements from the system a little bit differently. So you may need to correct, and now you can just buy that, vanadium or boron or bromide or sulfate and get the water parameters in line with natural seawater. We don't tell people to chase numbers. People do get obsessed with it. They stop buying corals until they have all greens on their ICP. And the one thing that Triton does that some of the others don't is we really give a behind-the-scenes look at what the elements do, what evidence is supported by these trace elements' role in seawater, and what corrections you can take to get your water back to where recommended.
Well, I'll tell you, it's I've been keeping reef tanks for over 25 years. I might be close to 30 years now, and SPS dominant reef tanks, and I had some very successful tanks without a lot of testing, but
Yep.
It's a lot of it is kind of flying blind.
Yep.
A lot of it though is also observation, and I've talked about this with other guests on prior shows, and that how important it is to be looking at your tank to see whether or not things are looking okay. If things are starting to look a little funky, then, like you mentioned, it's a great thing. It's a great tool to be able to order an ICP test and just have the precise perspective of what is going on with the tank and how you could potentially, correct any problems. So it is a good thing, and I never even thought in terms of how it could keep the industry honest in the with the salt mixes and all that stuff. That's an awesome point. I'm just looking to see if we have any questions from the viewers here. Let's see.
And that's a good point. I'm sorry, I'll let you go.
No, go ahead.
No, it's a good point you made about, we, like myself and people we know, a lot of people had success way before ICP. It's not needed for success. I think it increases the chances of people being successful. It's just another tool. Just like if, you're new in the kitchen and I give you the best pots and pans and recipes, doesn't mean you're going to make delicious tasting food. That's a skill. It doesn't matter the tools you have. It's only going to make a good chef better if he has good equipment. So you still have to have a great foundational understanding of what the corals need.
Yeah, no, great point. All right, so we have a quick question from EZ Tino. Is dosing on a 30-gallon tank overdoing it? I'm assuming he's talking about Triton.
Yeah, there's two ways to look at that. One is your least expensive 1 liter set is probably going to last you a year. If you're the type of person to stay home every day and you don't mind dosing it yourself, then man, that's an easy way to do it. You don't have to be so reliant on an RODI system, on mixing up salt, on the labor involved with it. So you can remove a lot of those variables and give the corals what they need. Of course, I don't know anything about the lighting, what kind of corals you want to keep, but typical Triton customers or Triton users would be SPS dominant mixed coral tanks. Ones that use a higher level of consumption than a softy or a low light tank. If it was a low light or a softy or an LPS on a 30-gallon tank, I would probably recommend just do a water change once a week. Know that your water's good. You're not going to pass a lot of water through your RODI, so your membranes and everything are going to stay relatively clean. That's probably the more economical and just easier way to do it. You change 5 gallons in a 30-gallon tank. You've diluted the waste and concentrated the elements, and it's easy and simple. It's hard to mess up.
Here's some more advice for Easy Tino. Get a bigger tank. Everybody does it anyway, right? If you get a bigger tank, and then you go
make the 30-gallon your sump.
There you go.
And then get 100-gallon. No.
Then you could use Triton supplements. So,
yeah.
All right, we have another question from a viewer in Europe. He says, "Great talk, thanks." Niles Van de Voort. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that. He's asking, as a U.S.-based aquaculture facility, any thoughts on how we can get those legendary named aquacultured U.S. frags from the U.S. to Europe?
We've never personally dabbled in exporting. We've always just been too darn busy with the domestic market and importing. But I can feel the itch to export, and we've gotten a lot of inquiries recently. I think you will find that the corals in person do look a little different than they do on the internet. And some of those named corals are coming out of common farms that are already shipping to you guys now. So if you can track down the species and locate and identify them from the source, what farm they're coming out of, or where in the wild out of Australia they're coming, the rest is coloring them up using the right lighting and nutrient levels. A lot of the colors that you see that we're pulling here in the U.S. are not natural in the wild. They're a product of the fluorescence from being hit with crazy amounts of, super actinic lighting and manipulating the nutrient levels, and that's how we're getting these corals to fluoresce. So the true strains are not that rare, most of them, I should say. So you might be better off, partnering with a store and trying to identify and track down some of these instead of paying an arm and a leg to buy them as named frags already. But to really answer your question, I don't know who's exporting right now. Worldwide Corals might be exporting. I heard a rumor Sea Dwelling might be exporting. If you keep checking with me at Unique Corals, I think in the next 6 months we probably will be exporting.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yep.
So got another question from Easy Tino. Running two AI 16s doing SPS and LPS. It was a Father's Day gift. I'm starting slow getting back into the hobby. Worldwide Corals are taking care of me here locally. Thanks. Take care. That wasn't
cool.
That was a comment.
Awesome. Those good guys at Worldwide Corals.
Yeah.
I'm very great friends with them.
So, Joe, I got a question for you, and I don't know if I'm putting you on the spot or not, but on your website it says that you use a variety of cutting-edge growth promoting techniques specific to the animals housed within each raceway. So, can you provide more information on those cutting-edge techniques in terms of growth promoting techniques that you guys use on the coral farm?
It's, every coral is a little different, and it has to do with knowing what lighting and parameters really complement growth the best. There's a lot of studies, and we didn't originate this, that show, by taking a coral and fragging it into a bunch of pieces and letting it grow together creates a mass much bigger than if the colony was just left alone. Also, keeping a lot of trace elements in the water will allow new corals to heal up. Strontium is used a lot when corals are healing. So if people are fragging corals, pay attention to your strontium and molybdenum levels. Maybe not molybdenum, strontium. Also, taking acropora and not growing them vertically, laying them horizontally, so you have a lot more surface area exposed to the light. You'll get corallite, like axial coralites, growing up along the branch instead of just the top one. Remember, when you glue an acropora straight up, this gets the most light. This gets kind of indirect light, especially with a centralized light source above. So just gluing that frag, it doesn't look good, but you'll get better growth that way. We pump in fresh air from outside. We were having pH issues, and as you know, as soon as you get that pH above 8.1, 8.2, you start to see magical things with growth. Keeping the nutrient levels a little bit higher and the alkalinity a little bit higher, along with the higher pH, results in faster growth. We dose amino acids, and we do heavy testing and dosing with spot traces that are low. There's nothing really magical that we do. We do things that are in any book or any good hobbyist online forum. We just try to do them a little bit differently for each coral.
Do you guys also put in any coral food, or is it just kind of aminos and the supplements in terms of Triton?
We use mainly only Reefroids now. We do a little bit of Benepets, but Reefroids has been really good to us. We see really good results. We'll shut the flow down. We'll baste it right into the corals. We'll do broadcast feeding as well. But definitely a lot of Reefroids. It seems to be an all-in-one nutritional food, and then some two little fishies amino acids we'll use.
And you're basically, is this for mostly the SPS, or is it both the SPS and LPS, everything?
Even the SPS do need a lot of food. LPS need more. As you know, they rely a little bit more heavily on prey capture, especially at night. They've got those tentacles. Anything that has you could learn a lot by a coral by looking at its morphology. If something's a large polyp, like a Duncan coral, that's capturing prey. So it needs to be fed. It needs nutrition, waterborne particulate food. That's why also in Triton we don't use particle filtration. We don't use mechanical filtration. I mean, protein skimmers, you can argue, is somewhat, it's mechanical. But we want that waste to stay in the system, get coated in bacteria, not worry about it chemically hurting the tank, but the physical waste gets filtered out by a lot of the corals. There's like marine snow present in a tank. I think people run their tanks too clean these days.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I started a new tank 5 years ago. My current tank, 187-gallon tank, and yeah, I definitely had issues. I started with dry rock only, and I definitely want to talk about Marco rocks. And okay. I started with Marco rocks, and I'd always started my tank with live rock, and okay. But yeah, I bottomed out my nutrients, and it was just one problem after another. But let's save that for a little bit later. I wanted to come back to the pH that you just talked about, in the fact that, 8.1 to 8.2, you kind of get that magical point when you go past that in terms of the growth rates for SPS and other corals. And you were talking about how you guys were pumping in some air from the outside, and obviously the more you could bring in terms of the carbon dioxide, the better, or at least have that diluted, right, in terms of the carbon dioxide. So, when in terms of your calcium reactors, when you're using a calcium reactor, that's going to drive the pH of the effluent is going to be lower, right, because of the reaction with the carbon dioxide. So, do you guys? I didn't notice. Are they dual chamber calcium reactors to help absorb that excess CO2?
So these are Destaco brand calcium reactors, and we are the importer here in the U.S. for them. We've been using them on our systems and selling them, and we love them. They work on a different principle. They don't have a pH monitor. They don't have bubble counters. They saturate CO2 inside the first chamber, actually inside a reaction chamber, and that dissolved saturated carbon dioxide has a pH of around 5.9, 6.0, which is the perfect pH to dissolve the pure marble media. So yes, the pH is around 6.0 inside the belly of the beast. It's a dual chamber reactor. So when the effluent comes out, I actually haven't even tested it in years. To me, I don't need to test it, but it's probably in the high 6s, so you're still getting some suppression. We like to let it drip a little bit before it hits the system. I feel like some of the CO2 might be driven off that way. And if the system is stable and aerated and you have a good protein skimmer and you've got good surface exchange, calcium reactors really shouldn't be the breaking point on a tank's pH. I like to think that there's other issues with ventilation, with circulation, with gas exchange, where the calcium reactor effluent becomes the death blow that puts you over the edge. I remember Sanjay, everybody knows Sanjay, he got a Destaco reactor from us a few years ago, and when he first set it up on his system, he was hitting 7.4, 7.5, he was losing corals. I thought he was going to take it off the system. And I was a little disheartened. I'm like, well, if Sanjay can't make this thing work, man, this is not going to do well in the field. But then he made some changes to it. I think he got some fresh air in. He got more surface agitation, increased the flow on the surface, and now he's at 8.2, 8.3, and he's fine, and he loves it. So I think, if you fix the other issues, the calcium reactor shouldn't be the thing to blame. But calcium reactors are, very beneficial especially for big systems.
Yeah, I've used calcium reactors for years. Actually, right now I'm using 2-part, but I'm getting a new display tank to add to the system here, and I'm going to probably go with a calcium reactor. I have my systems in a basement, and so it's tough in terms of getting the air into the basement. I mean, I got some windows and whatnot, so I can crack the windows in the summertime or the fall time, but in the winter time, that is not as convenient to be able to do that. So I have run airline tubing, outside the window and just crack the windows just a little bit to try to get the the air into the skimmer. I think another thing you can do, right, in terms of the effluent that could help is have it to drip near the intake for the protein skimmer, right? So that would help optimize the aeration and help drive
the
down
CO2 out. Yeah,
right.
I worry you might get some precipitation on the pump having those heavy minerals going into the skimmer. So we don't typically recommend that, but I think you'd probably get more. You'd probably drive off more of it. One thing I see that people are doing that is very smart is to put a scrubber on their skimmer and recirculate it. So you're scrubbing the scrubbed air. Because remember, you don't need oxygen really inside the skimmer. You need air. You need surface tension for the bubbles. Right. So if you just keep scrubbing the same air on the protein skimmer, your media will last that much longer, and you'll get a much more positive bump with every scrub. Obviously, it's going to limit out, but you'll get some real good boosts there. We run apexes, and we see them on our office tanks in the city. When no one's in the offices during the weekends, the pH is noticeably higher. And then as soon as the offices fill up with people, the pH drops from all the CO2 respiration. Same thing in our system on the apex monitors. We see the pH runs higher on the weekends when less staff is there.
Interesting. One last question on the calcium reactors, Joe. Do you guys ever find the need to run a caulk reactor, using kalkwasser to?
No, and you really shouldn't. If you're running a calcium reactor, and it's dialed in and things are good, you should be getting equal parts of calcium carbonate, and you should not really need the boost from kalkwasser. Of course, you can do it. You'll get a slightly, you get a pH bump and evaporative water. It's always nice to use. A lot of old school reefers use the calcium reactor with the kalkwasser. But we don't do that. Actually, on one of our systems, we run kalkwasser, but that's anomaly.
I used to do that, but I stopped doing it. And I think the dual chamber calcium reactors will are sufficient in terms of absorbing the CO2. All right, enough questions about the calcium reactor. We got a bunch of questions from the viewers here. Planet 3D is asking, Joe Caparatta, do you guys track the annual price of corals? If so, what was the most expensive and cheapest year to buy corals?
I don't have that data. I don't. I'm sorry. That's a great question. But if I had to guess the most expensive year, I think prices are still going up. When Indonesia shut down about two summers ago, I think it was, it took a few months, but the prices really shot up. So I think 2019, we really saw crazy prices. Now this year, it's weird because of COVID and stuff, and we can't even get flights. Indonesia opened up, but we can't get any flights in. So the prices are still high. So right now, I think we're still seeing peak prices, and the hobby is hot right now. Especially, as an online company, we're seeing a surge in sales because people are home. They can't go out. They can't travel. So they're spending money on their home stuff. It's kind of logical. But as far as the cheapest, I think the further you go back in time, it wasn't even, you had to pay for it. All the hobby trade shows was all trading. When people got together and went to a reef club, nobody sold corals. In the late 90s, everything was trading. So everybody had their genetics in everyone's tank. And if your tank crashed, everybody gave you frags back. Those were some really great times. And I'm thankful to be a part of some of those trading sessions where you just didn't charge. If you did, you charged $5, whatever. I mean, it was a different time.
Yeah, no, I mean, you bring up a great point in terms of, the old-time frag swaps and reef clubs. Those are such important events, and events like Reefapalooza today. Those are, reef, frag swaps on steroids. I mean, there's just so many people and vendors and folks that attend those things. But I always say that frag swaps, just with a local frag swap, it's an awesome thing for people as a learning experience. It's not only for people that have been in the hobby for years and years and can swap frags, which is awesome, and I used to do that, and it was a lot of fun. But it's also for people to like learn a lot from experienced hobbyists. So those are great things, and hopefully those will continue on and on and on to help serve this hobby. It's a great educational experience.
Yep.
So we have a couple of other comments from K Dub. What's up there, K Dub? Didn't see you in the live stream earlier tonight, but welcome back here.
C-Dub? Is it K-Dub or C-Dub?
I see. It's K Dub. K Dub.
Okay, because I know a C-Dub.
You know a C Dub. All right. So K Dub's got a few comments here. Let me see if I can interpret these things. He's asking, I decided to use a T5 system with a small LED strip to supplement. Do you think this will be acceptable for growing corals, SPS and LPS?
Oh, heck yeah. There's a loyal army of T5 users that'll never dump their T5s. I mean, some of the best tanks I've seen were T5. I think if you can give a little bit of supplemental actinic, precision pop with some diodes that that are super actinic, I mean, that's the best of both worlds. We're really seeing like the T5 hybrid fixtures where you have double flanked T5s and then the LED of your choice in the middle. I think that's just an amazing thing right there.
Yeah, and for my new tank, I've always used metal halides. I've never had 400 watt 20K metal halides. I'm old school. Yep. I've never gone LEDs, but for the new tank, I'm going to be using LEDs. And I've been looking at those hybrid fixtures in terms of the T5s and the LEDs, and that certainly seems like the best of both worlds in terms of getting the the color growing part of the LEDs and the spread with the T5.
Spread, yeah. That's what you really benefit with the T5s is that soft, balanced, full tank, full lighting, which is hard to get from LEDs, but it's not impossible. I love these Illumagics. We're seeing really good results with them. This right here, if I can deviate and show you.
Oh yeah, let's give us a tour there, Joe.
Okay, so this is a 5-foot Illumagic. There's actually 2 of them that go on here, but I sold one because somebody needed it. So we have these bars that connect onto here. I hope you can see it. And this will allow you to run 2 at a slight angle. So there'll normally be 2 lights on here at a slight angle, giving me that real full blanket effect that T5s would give, but at a much bigger wattage punch with very little heat and a lot more controllability. So even though T5s are great, if you go with the right LED setup, I think your par numbers, everything will just be even greater. And I mean, there's so many great tanks now with LEDs. There's no argument anymore that LEDs are not going to produce fantastic results. There's really no reason to go with those with the heat and the lifespan, the short lifespan of metal halides. I love halides too. This is my 1,200 gallon over here. This tank had 6 1,000 watt 20K radiums on it when it was in Manhattan. This is my show tank there.
Oh, that's the show. That's a show tank from Manhattan Aquariums.
Yep.
Holy smokes, man! You moved it out to California.
I moved it out here because we needed the space.
Holy
so
mackerel.
This is 5 feet front to back.
I used to love that. I used to love looking at that tank.
Yep. I got the Abyss pump. I had advanced acrylic, make a custom wet dry. This is actually going to be an Amazonian. I'm really into freshwater too. So at my house, I didn't want to go crazy on the maintenance. So this is going to be an Amazonian tank with some natural sunlight,
awesome.
Cardinal tetras, all kinds of rare stuff, beautiful pieces of driftwood. And then these are some freshwater biotopes that are all kind of sleek. I hid the lighting. These are the Kessel lights. I built this out of white acrylic, and then I sunk the wire into the acrylic, and I threaded it and mounted it into the sheetrock. So it's nice and strong, and my controllability is here. So I could adjust the spectrum, if I want to make it blue. And all the filtration is going to be behind the wall. I put in bulkheads here. So these green is just for test. I have clear acrylic that's going to be bent. So this is all clear. It's the Hydro Wizard pump here, which is a badass pump. And some really cool biotopes. And then I want to show you guys this one. This is an antique tank from the mid 1800s. This is a J.W. Fisk. He was an iron worker in Manhattan, and he was commissioned to make a bunch of these bronze tanks. So I had Trent at Custom Crystal Dynamics redo the whole thing for me. He stripped off all the paint. We took out the glass. He built new glass inside it. We epoxy coated the bottom. I have to figure out what I want to do with these weird iron fittings here. I kind of want to keep it somewhat era specific. I don't want a big hang-on filter or Eheim thing, so I might just do an airline, an airstone. And I'm reading some old books from the 1900s just to see what they were doing back then. Aquarium inhabitants management. So I'll probably go with some white clouds and paradise fish, maybe some Anacharis or Elodia, and just keep it really simple. And this is my water box reef. This is all Marco rocks with that really cool ledge.
Awesome.
And connected to it is another water box tank that is going to have a 4-foot mangrove in it. And the mangrove is actually outside. It's growing. And then I drilled it here so I could have a fixed water level about 6 inches from the top. So I don't have to worry about fish jumping. And this will be a Caribbean mangrove that's going to run outside and connect onto this filter. So you can see where I'm going with it. But, you know, it just takes a while. And I want it done right. And I don't mind if it takes another 6 months.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, when are you going to see water hitting those tanks?
Well, you know, my kids, I have a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, and they've been home with us since March. We have no help. Not that we need help, but my wife and I are trying to work and keep the kids sane and peace in the house. And all the parks are closed. Everything's closed. The zoo's closed. The beaches are closed. So this room has to wait.
Yeah, you don't have to explain it. As soon as you said that, you know, yeah, it totally makes sense. But
no in-laws, nothing. Everyone's afraid. Everyone's home.
K-Dubs is saying, tell him his rock structure looks like an Imperial Star Destroyer. Looks awesome.
No, it doesn't. Yes, it does. Everyone says that. In fact, when I put one rock on the top, like if I put one more up here, this is the command post right here. I'll do it for K-Dub. Right there.
Sweet.
There's your Imperial Destroyer.
Sweet. So Joe, it's getting close to 8 o'clock my time and 5 o'clock your time. We haven't really talked about Marco rocks. Do you have a few more minutes to chat about Marco rocks?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I mean, I was using the product for many, many, many years. Most of our setups would have, I mean, first it was live rock, then we would do the dry Marco. We did real reef too, but I became friends with the owner, Mark, and there was an option to join the company. One of the partners wanted out, so I said, you know what, screw it, let's do it. So a couple years ago, we got involved with that, and we've made some new products, and the rock is just very popular. It's a no frills, dry rock. You have to treat it like dry rock. You know, if you stick it in a tank and run your phosphates high, you're going to have algae blooms. But what you get in return is a low price point and a rock that looks like live rock once you get it through the ugly phase. And I think people are realizing that there's no fast way to cycle a tank. And your rock structure should be porous, and it should be aragonite based. And that's what you get from this. You get a natural porous. It's a fossilized coral reef. It's calcium carbonate. It leaves a white limestone residue in your hands, and it's super porous. And those are the two main things that you want in your rock structure. You know, looks, aesthetics, those are obviously important, but from a biological standpoint, you really can't beat pure calcium-based rock. You do need to supplement with some bacteria. I am a big believer in the beneficial boost of live rock and all the inhabitants that come in on it. I think a lot of the success in our industry really got a jump start when we started bringing in live rock. But personally, I don't really like to bring in live rock. I don't trust the sources that, you know, reefs weren't blown up to get it. So I'd rather, you know, we figure out how to make dry rock the best we can. And there's some really good products on the market now that speed up the life cycle. And if you're adding corals and adding, you know, zoanthid rocks, things with live rock on it, you will seed your tank. It might take a little bit longer, but you will get an established colony of good bacteria over time.
Yeah, like I mentioned, you know, I started my current reef with live or dry rock for the first time ever, and you know, it was too sterile, and I did use a bacteria boosting product. But talk a little bit more in terms of what you guys recommend that you use for, you know, specifically products in terms of the bacteria boosters or You know, you talked about seeding with a little live rock. I mean, it does take longer with dry rock tanks to get it established and to be able to start really growing SPS. But specifically, what do you guys recommend for a Marco
I've been
rock?
using the Fritz. I'll actually show you. I have a bottle right here. Take me 1 second. This is the Fritz Turbo 900.
Yep.
This is good stuff. Comes refrigerated, really cold. It only has like a 3-month shelf life, but that's got a lot of good bacteria in it. And Polyp Lab makes a really good bacteria product. Brightwell makes a good product. Dr. Tim's we've used before. I don't have any real favorites. If I had to turn to one right now, I've been using the Fritz, and it's doing well. Of course, I don't really compare and do isolate to see which one is doing better. So I'm just shooting from the hip. But I think any of the good brands on the market right now are going to deliver pretty good results. And just patience. If you have the patience, just cycle the tank, put a UV on the tank. BRS just did that study. They ran a bunch of tanks with Marco rocks, some with UV, some with the UV with high flow, some with UV with low flow, some without a UV, and they saw the differences in the algae growth and species that grew in the tank as it was maturing. And hands down, the tank with high flow UV on a tank that was cycling had the least amount of nuisance algae that grew. Obviously, when you dose the bacteria, you don't want your UV to be on.
Yeah, you just answered a question from K-Dub about UV sterilizers. He was asking whether or not you guys use them. So it sounds like in certain instances that you would utilize a UV.
Yeah, you know, I've always I've kind of oscillated over the years back and forth. I've had big units on systems that still got nasty fish parasites, and then when I got introduced to Triton and reducing variables, it kind of made sense because most of the reef tanks I've ever had personally never had UVs. I knew the fish's health was largely dependent on not being overcrowded, the fish not being stressed, and feeding them properly and having a strong immune system. That's 80% of your battle against nuisance, parasites. The UV is just going to help a little bit, but it's not going to keep sick fish healthy. It's definitely not.
Right.
In a reef tank, there's arguments that it's constantly killing things. It is killing things in the water column. It's rendering anything that passes through it sterile. It can't reproduce if it's exposed to enough UV radiation. Thankfully, if you run it through high flow, we're really only targeting the real small microorganisms. And your water will be a little bit clearer, your redox might be a little bit higher, and you probably get a little bit less dinos in the tank and less nuisance algae. So I'm for doing UV. I think if installed properly, it'll help you.
Should it be run 24/7 or at night? Any particular schedule for a UV?
I think in the beginning when you're stocking a tank, so there's two ways to do it. It's all about flow and wattage. Same UV with different flow is a completely different beast. When you're cycling a tank in the beginning, I would run high flow to really keep the waste levels, the algae at bay. Then when you're starting to stock the tank with fish, dial the UV all the way down to a flow rate of whatever, 10 to 15 gallons per hour per watt. That's the right dwell time to kill cryptocaryon, odynium, some of those nasty parasites. Even if it doesn't eradicate them completely, it's going to knock their numbers down and at least give the fish a longer chance to fight it off with their immune system. And then once the tank is stocked with fish and they're fat and healthy, you can almost take it offline and save the bulb until you need it. I mean, if the tank is running great, kind of like a train with momentum, you can take your foot off the gas, just let the thing coast.
Yeah, I've done that with UV. I've used it just to kind of like spot treat certain issues, bacterial blooms, what have you, and then I put it in the closet or on the shelf. And the schedule question that I just asked before in terms of running the UV, that reminded me of another question that I forgot to ask you about the coral foods. You mentioned you guys use some of the. What did you guys in terms of the coral foods? I know you mentioned
using Reefroids.
Right, Reefroids. Is that something that you feed when the lights are out, or does it matter in terms of whether the lights are on? Feeding that Reefroids.
So in truth, my staff is there when the lights are on, so they feed when the lights are on.
Yeah.
But in a perfect world, you'd want to first put a little bit of food in to get a polyp response.
Yep.
Then after 20, 30 minutes, shut the flow and just shut the exchange between your filtration and your tank, and just run your circulation pumps within the tank so the food's moving around, then broadcast feed. And if you do that effectively, the water is moving within the aquarium. The corals are going to be feeding on all of that food when their polyps are exposed, and you'll get the best response at night. That's when corals shift from a photosynthetic feed mode to a prey capture. So if you can do it at night, 10 o'clock at night, if your lights go off at 9, maybe just a little bit of dim blue, tickle the tank with a little bit of food first. If you can get into that routine, man, the corals will really, really thank you.
Yeah.
We didn't talk about Pax Bellums. We've got 6 Pax Bellums we're about to install on all of our raceways too with nutrient export, and we're going to be selling the Chaeto Morpher from it. And there'll be a C36 Pax Bellum going on this system. I'm probably going to put it outside because we're in sunny California, so why not? Keep the equipment outside, even though it's a sexy piece of equipment.
Yeah, I know. Pax Bellums, I've run Triton's algae reactors. They're awesome. I mean, they're supercharged in terms of being able to get your nutrients down. But the beauty of those units is that they're so controllable, right, in terms of the adjusting the light cycle. But that's a great way in terms of exporting nutrients. Well,
and you get your pH higher too. You run it on a reverse photo period,
right,
and you reload. You can add it to an existing system if you don't have room for a typical refugium. Much smaller footprint with a higher yield of nutrient export, and you'll definitely see a pH bump because you're scavenging all that CO2 for the algae from the water column, not from the surface like in an algae scrubber.
Right. I'm going to circle back to Marco Rocks again, and I'm going to ask you a couple of rapid fire questions, and we'll wrap it up. How does that sound, Joe? So in terms of what I saw in your tank there in your home, I don't even want to call that a home office. I don't even know what you want to call that. That's the home fish room, let's call it. But was that the little fishies Stacks rock that was in that tank?
No, it's not. So the Stacks rock is a 2-sided cut rock that we actually produce for 2 little fishies. So we take it and it's cut. A reef saver rock is cut twice to produce a slab of rock. This rock over here is only cut once. So the bottom of it is flat, and that's what we call foundation rock.
Okay.
So this just sits perfectly in the bottom of a tank. And I think for best results, if you take a little piece of silicone and put a couple of dabs just to elevate it off the ground, you'll get even better water flow, and you don't even have rock touching glass. You just have like a silicone little rubber mat or something. So that gives you a really firm foundation. It doesn't jiggle like a typical amorphic shaped rock will. So I use foundation rock down here, and then this is the premium shelf. This is our shelf rock. It's beautiful stuff. And then I cemented it together with the E Marco 400, which is a product that we've had for a long time. And then a Panerai in here, which is going to be way too much flow, but I just did it just because.
Just because.
Just because. I'll probably pull it out and put the ECM 42, which is the one that's in the 6-foot tank.
Oh, sweet. So on the last episode, my guest was Greg Carroll, and we were talking about your aquascaping. You aquascaped his tank with Marco Rocks. You want to just talk briefly about aquascaping, some tips and tricks for some folks?
Sure. Something I tell everybody is it's human nature to fall in love with whatever it is you're doing. So when you're aquascaping a tank, your eye wants to see the finished result. It's human nature. However, this is like trying to fall in love with the foundation of your house. The house goes on top of the foundation. The foundation's in the ground. Your rock work is the foundation of your reef tank. Your corals go on top of the rock. Some of them in crusts, but most corals are going to grow up and out of the rock and eventually die and create the rock of the future. So if you want your finished product to somewhat be visible and have 4 or 5, 6 inches of water above the reef structure so fish can swim above it, then your rock needs to be X amount of inches lower depending on what kind of corals you want to go with. With the technology and the lighting we have these days, with staghorns, within a year or two, your stag frags are going to be 8 inches, 10 inches. So don't think, well, my corals probably won't grow that fast. They will. And most people regret that they put too much rock in the tank or they went too high, because every rock you put in is using up water space and space to have fish and corals. So, we do have a rough calculation of how many pounds of rock supports the biological needs of a tank. But now with the external filters we have and the ceramic media blocks and the PEX Bellums, we don't really need to be so reliant on the surface area of the biological rock itself, you know, the old Berlin method days. So I would strip it down and do a minimal amount of rock, create different bommies. Definitely don't stack your rocks in the back of the tank like people used to. Leave access all around to run your magnet and for water to move. And don't make 2 mounds of the same height. The eye likes to see one mound be higher for contrast, and it just creates a real nice juxtaposition in the tank. And remember too, if your lights are, you know, at the center of the tank, the corals grow up into the light. So as the corals grow, you're going to see the undersides of it. I remember Sanjay saying once his lights were in the middle of the tank. The corals grew so much into the lights, his view was the undersides of all the corals. So now he keeps the lights a little bit forward and angled at the front of the tank, and the corals grow into the light, giving him a nice display. So those are some tricks I would recommend.
Yeah, I mean, back in the day, it used to be the standard used to be, I think, 2 pounds of live rock per gallon. So, you know, that was like a lot of rock for a tank, and brick walls were a common thing back a number of years ago. All right, Joe.
Stack it up.
Yeah, some all right, rapid fire questions for you. I'm going to wrap it up here. So, what is your favorite SPS coral?
The Solomon Islands Purple Monster, which we are going to hunt for once we get back in the water over there.
I got a frag of that right now that's growing out, but that is one of my favorites. That and the Oregon Blue Tort. Favorite LPS coral?
Favorite LPS? Probably an elegance coral.
Okay.
Hard to beat, a beautiful elegance coral. Pink tip, beautiful. I mean, this has it all.
Okay. Favorite fish?
Achilles tang.
Interesting. Dream tank, is it already there in your room?
If my wife is watching, yes. If she's not watching, no.
Good answer.
That'll be a big one day.
All right, Joe, man. Thank you so much for being a guest. This was a lot of fun. And any final thoughts before we wrap it up?
No, just keep it simple. Get your hand out of the tank. There is one piece of anecdotal evidence I want to share with you guys. When Jim Welsh was working on his Triton several years ago, before it was the Triton, you know, he partnered with Apex. He came to me in our hotel room at Macnan, and he was going over some of the anecdotal discoveries. And one of the things was that when he started testing his alkalinity every hour, he noticed that it was very consistent day after day. But when he'd stick his hand in his tank, or when he'd frag a coral, the alkalinity went up. Even though he was dosing the same, there was some kind of environmental stressor going on in the tank, whether it was coral slime or finger slime or something that told all the corals to stop using minerals that day, well, for 6 hours, and stop their growth. So I think if you keep sticking your hand in there and you frag corals and you move stuff around, we're just starting to understand the effects of the stress on the animals in the aquarium. You know, getting back to Triton and keeping it holistic and just letting it grow. You know, the less we do to the tank, the better. But certainly you have to do your maintenance. So try to develop a plan that matches you. Like Zeovit is not for everybody. You're riding on the edge, like redlining an engine. So pick a method that mates well to your lifestyle, the amount of hours you can spend on that tank every day. You might not have crazy pastel corals, but at least you have a reef tank you can be proud of and that won't drive you crazy at night.
No, that's great advice. All right, Joe, man. Thanks again for being a guest. So my next show is going to be Thursday, July 16th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and my guest will be Mo-Kee Chow, who is also known as the Inappropriate Reefer. I don't know, Joe, do you know Mo-Kee?
I know of him. I know of him.
He's got a huge social media following, so I'm going to learn a lot about that stuff when I have him on the show next week. But he will be my guest next week. I'm psyched for that. But Joe, thanks again, Joe. I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your thoughts and knowledge. It was very educational for sure. So until then, everybody, stay safe, be well, and we'll see you next time.